Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Tao of the Day. This is Martin John, and we are here to talk about the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching is an ancient text written about 600 BCE, and on this program, we talk about it as a philosophy, not as a religion or anything like that. It's just a way of living a more reasonable life. The Tao Te Ching helped me deal with addiction. The Tao Te Ching helped me deal with getting an MS diagnosis and having been bedridden for a month. The Tao Te Ching is just always trying to get us to recognize that things are as they are. I mean, I guess we could chalk it up to it is what it is. But it's doing it with grace, and it's doing it with an understanding of like, here I am. What is that saying about me, and what is my reaction? What information am I getting about myself? You know, the other day we talked about a verse that said, studying others, you gain knowledge, but study yourself and gain deep wisdom. And the thing is you're having this singular subjective experience. Nobody else is having the same experience as you, and you're coming upon information that is truth, right? And this is why a number of the texts of the Tao end with, how do I know this is true? By looking inside myself, by being aware, by being present within my life. And that's how I know truth. I've learned truth through this singular subjective experience. I can't have the same experience as you, and because I'm having this one experience and it's guiding me to truth, you're going to have your own experience, and you're going to be guided to the same truth, but you're going to come at it from a completely different direction. It's just something wonderful about our subjective experiences. The biggest issue I think we can fall into is thinking that our subjective experience is the right experience, or thinking that our subjective experience is the experience that everybody should be having. Thinking that that which I am aligned with living is some sort of standard that everyone else has to live. But understanding that everybody approaches this differently. And, one of the wonderful things about the Tao is it provides for that as well. It allows you to replace the word Tao with whatever you want. And the experience that you're going to have with the truth is going to emerge through your subjective experience, right? So you're going to find truth. And Tao isn't afraid of this. This is what's great about these 81 chapters. It's not afraid of you finding your way here through another course. But it's always talking of truth. It's always speaking of what is true. And it's always saying, look, you're going to be here having your experience. That does not mean that other people aren't having, aren't going to be aligned with other experiences. The experience that you're having isn't right, but it's right for you. And so, understanding that as we move forward and as we kind of live our lives and try and figure out, how we're going to grow and heal and do all of these amazing things. When people align with Tao, lots of things start happening. You start supporting other people without even trying, because you're aligned. You're aligned with nature. You're aligned with all things. And so I clicked on the random number generator, as I do in the mornings, and we got 58 today. To oversee, don't interfere. So that's the title, to oversee, don't interfere. And that means well, first off, to oversee, that means maybe raising a child. It might be overseeing your garden, overseeing the dinner you're making, overseeing, your part in the relationship that you're in, or whatever. To oversee, if you're in control of something, if you're allowing yourself to be in that position of power over something else, maybe don't interfere. So if you find yourself being a parent, there's a point where you don't interfere. You can help guide, but you don't have to interfere. You don't have to get in the middle of it. So let's see. Maybe that's what this is pointing to. It's been a little while since I've read this one, so let's go ahead and read this together. In overseeing anything, don't interfere. Let everything flourish in its own time. Interfering, you get met with resistance, or worse, apathetic adherence. Misery and misfortune are tied to expectations. To expect success is to focus on failure. To expect happiness is to invite misery. To expect moral adherence is to flirt with tragedy. There is no escaping it. Expecting good yields bad. This is interfering, and it has always been true. The master, therefore, is content to simply be an example. She has no desire to impose and trusts all that she oversees. She is firm but yielding. She is sharp, yet none are cut by her. She is radiant, but easy on the eyes. So we go through a number of spaces here. We go through another number of things. First, it starts with, in overseeing anything, don't interfere. Let everything flourish in its own time. So anything that you're in control of, anything that you're overseeing, anything that you're, if you're a teacher, you're overseeing your classroom and the children in your classroom, don't interfere. Let them flourish in their own time. Now, do you have to help guide? Yeah, sure. But you don't have to get in the way of them being who they are. Of course, there do, like when you're in class, if somebody is doing something that is, so egregious that, like they can't stay in the class, well, then that's a thing that you have to address. I'm going to take a note really quick that I picked 58. And then Omar joined me. Omar, how are you, man?
Yeah, cool. But I have a question. Someone refuses to take care.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat that?
What if someone refuses to take guidance?
To take guidance? Well, I mean, if someone refuses, give me a full example rather than just throwing that out. Because if they refuse to take guidance, you don't have to interfere and you don't have to force them to take guidance. The consequences will speak for themselves. I mean, if you are a teacher and you tell someone, hey, look, if you keep this up, you're going to get kicked out of school, and they continue to do it and they get kicked out of school, okay, that's what happens.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
So guidance is one thing and interfering is another, you can guide somebody and they will, and everybody will, as it says here, they will flourish in their own time. I mean, I've known people that were addicts and were in prison, and years later, they are helping people in IOP programs and going to prisons and speaking, and they're working with their government working with their local government to help those that were in the position that they found themselves in. So is it possible that they could have gotten there without all of the prison time, without being put in solitary confinement, without all of those things? Yeah, possibly. But that's not what happened. They flourished in their own time.
Yeah, understand.
Yeah. So, are you familiar with Tao of the Day?
No, actually, no.
No, okay. All right. So, what we do here, and welcome, first off, what we do here is talk about the Tao Te Ching. And so that's what I just read, that chapter that I just read. These chapters are fairly short, and what I do is I ask my guests to pick a number between 1 and 81, and we kind of figure out how those. It's kind of like an oracle kind of like, oh, there's information here for you. So what do you do, Omar?
What do you mean, what do I do?
I don't know, whatever that means to you. Like, what's important to you in your life?
Well, right now it's finding myself.
Finding yourself, yeah. Can I ask how old you are?
I'm in my 30s.
Early 30s?
Yeah.
So have you heard of a time called the Saturn's return?
Nope.
No. Well, that happens in your early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. And it's a time when purpose, like questions come to your mind that haven't been in your head since you were like 3 years old, if they've been in your head at all. New questions, new sort of things. What's that?
No, yeah, I get you. Those kind of questions.
Yeah. They're like questions about purpose. Now, this has astrological sort of significance, but it's not astrology sort of information. It's just that is a huge transitional time in one's life. So I'd love to ask you, if you have the time to chat, to pick a number between 1 and 81.
181. Say 77.
77. I believe that's the bending of a bow. So this is all about balance. This is all about when actions, reactions, how things are adjusted in life. So I don't know what you're going through, but I'm going to go ahead and read this and we'll chat a little bit about it. This is entitled The Bending of a Bow. Tao acts on the world as the bending of a bow. The top is forced down when the bottom is moved up. It is impossible for one to act without the other responding. Unlike men, Tao is patient and neutral, quietly adjusting excess and deficiency, taking from what is too much and giving to what isn't enough. Ordinary men go against Tao, taking resources from areas that are deficient and giving resources to areas that compulsively consume. The master knows all things are being adjusted. Although she cannot see it in action, she has faith that it is working through her. In this way, she allows her actions to unfold, neither dwelling on them nor taking credit. Aligned with Tao, they complement all things. Did anything stand out to you with that?
Yes, it does. Actually, comes to mind the passage of someone wielding a bow. The actions after bow isn't strong, don't come to matter. Only the actions before. You're in control of your emotions. You're in control of anything that or you're strong.
So you're breaking up a little bit, but it seems like you're saying that you stay in control of your emotions and you stay in control. And so, yes, the idea here is that we understand that things are being adjusted and that we're not overly, and so my guess is that maybe the message that you might need to hear is that no matter what is happening right now, things are being adjusted. Yes, things can seem wild and tumultuous at times. Things can seem like they don't work out for you. Things can seem like you don't get your due. Things can seem like nobody's listening. But things are always being adjusted. So those moments that they seem like everything's working against you, we have to be calm and recognize that it is working through me. And there will be a time that this, I will sow from the seeds that I've sown. You've sown many seeds in your life, I'm sure. And you will reap the benefits of that.
Yeah, boy.
What was that?
No, yeah.
Yeah. So that's at the core of what this is saying, is that things are being adjusted. Don't get so hung up on everything that you see, and make sure that you're keeping the balance in your life. Because if you continue to put, and I don't know if you do this, but what it says is ordinary men go against Tao, taking resources from areas that are deficient, giving resources to areas that compulsively consume. Think about where you're spreading your energy. And is there a way to balance that? Are you trying to be too productive? Are you giving yourself no time and space to be Omar? Simply you, as you are. Are you always trying to prove yourself? Because if you are, then maybe you need to step back and trust yourself a little more. I mean, I don't know what's going on in your life. I mean, you're in your early 30s, so my guess is that there are some new questions that are coming up and new ways, and you're going to have to figure out new ways of living and new ways of being and new ways of understanding who you are in the relationships that you're in. Does any of that resonate?
It resonates pretty much.
Okay. So what I normally do is take this text and I will send it to you in a message here on the Noom Vibe app, and you'll be able to read through it later and think about it a little bit more.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful day, and we'll be in touch again. Come back up sometime.
Okay, I'll try.
Bye-bye. Okay, Omar, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I'm just taking a note really quick so that I can remember to so I can send that text to you. So I'm going to go back to 58 to oversee, don't interfere. And that's what brought Omar up. He was asking about what if people don't want to be guided? Well, that's their, don't interfere. Don't force them to be guided. Don't force them to take your advice. Let them do what they do. And that doesn't mean push them over a cliff, right? Like if they're heading to a cliff. So it's like we have to be careful about that, right? Because if our ego gets in the way, we could want to see somebody fail if they don't take our advice. That could come up just out of ego. Ego, you don't want to listen to me? Well, I hope you fail. like that can happen. Like, let's not, we have to take into consideration the fact that when people have ideas of something that adjust, like someone invited me to be a part of an art show in January, and I accepted. And if they know it's going to be recorded. I remember I was talking to somebody when I was doing their portrait, and they expressed to me that they cheated on their wife regularly with different people. And, to look at that, like that's vulnerable. And what they're really doing is processing it for themselves. They're not telling me. I'm just a sounding board so that they can hear themselves. And they can fess up, and they can go through the pain of that they're going through without having to hide from it. And I allowed them to be in that space, and I didn't chastise them. It's not something that I would support. But this is what, in overseeing anything, don't interfere. I'm overseeing this person kind of confess. I don't have to step in. They're going to be better people. Eventually, they'll flourish in their own time, as it says. Interfering, you only get met with resistance, or worse, apathetic adherence. Now, I want to talk about this a little bit, because when I decided to write apathetic adherence, there was something really significant about that. So when you interfere into somebody, if you tell somebody they're wrong, so if you're talking about politics these days and you're telling, your left, cousin or your right father or whatever, like all of these wings, that they're wrong, interfering, you only get met with resistance. The more you tell them they're wrong, the more they're going to resist, because they're going to double down on their ego. They don't want to be told they're wrong. Who wants to be told they're wrong? Nobody. So you have to be able to allow them the space to be who they are. Once you interfere, you get met with resistance, or worse, apathetic adherence. Get this. You tell somebody they're wrong, and they say, oh, okay, I'm wrong. Now, you don't know what they think. That's apathetic adherence. They're doing what you want them to do. They're doing what you want them to. They're saying what you want them to say. They're doing what you want them to do. But they don't believe it, and they don't care. You have now created a wild card in your life. It's better to have someone resist you, because then at least you know what they think. But when you get someone giving you apathetic adherence, you have no idea. And if you believe their apathetic adherence, you're even more in the dark than ever. And I'll tell you, this is one of the biggest issues, I think, revolving around like teen rebellion and drug use and other things like that. Because what happens is you interfere with your kid growing up. You tell them how you want them to be. You tell them who you want them to be. And they resist, and you strong-arm them, and then they either continue resisting. That's usually a firstborn. But a secondborn is going to come in and give you apathetic adherence. They're going to say, yes, Mom. Yes, Dad. Sure thing. No big deal. And they are going to just apathetically adhere, and their world becomes apathetic. Their world becomes something they're not excited about. They're not interested in engaging, and they start to escape. That's why it says, or worse, apathetic adherence. Now, you don't even know your child is escaping. You don't even know this person is escaping. And it's all because of us trying to interfere and make someone be something they're not. Now, I'm not saying every child is doing this. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that you're the reason that this is happening either. But you get left in the dark when you get to that apathetic adherence place. When people are apathetically adhering to your desires because you're interfering with their lives. This could be your partner. This could be your children. This could be anybody. But if you're overseeing something, don't interfere. Observe, guide, and allow them to do what they do. With love, deep love. There is no reason to pull your love from somebody and pull your support from somebody. Omar came up and said, how do we get people if they don't want to be guided? Well, we have to recognize there are consequences. And even in my life, like whoever you are that's saying that, like even in your life, there's going to be a line that has to be drawn. You'll draw that line where it needs to be drawn for you. You'll say, okay, that's it. Out of the house. You've been given fair warning. or whatever it is, whatever has to happen so that, there's no damage being done to others. Now it says misery and misfortune are tied to expectation. If you have expectation, you will eventually find misery and misfortune because those expectations won't be met. Yesterday, I believe, I was talking to Melissa, and Melissa was talking about like everything's going to turn out okay. And then I pointed out, well, when you say everything's going to be okay, do you have expectations of what that looks like? Because if you have expectations of what that looks like, it could turn out okay, but you might not notice it because your expectations weren't met. And if you don't notice it, then you may experience misery and or misfortune. To expect success is to focus on failure. To expect happiness is to focus on misery. So we've heard about this before, right? Because we have seen in, like, if you guys have done any sort of mindfulness or law of attraction work or anything like that, what you're experiencing is like, oh, I want to make all this money. I want to have all this money. I want to have all this money. I want to have all this love. I want to have all this love. But what you're focusing on is the fact that you don't have it, right? You focus on you don't have money, and so money stays at arm's length because you're focused on lack, right? And that's, in asking the question, why don't I have all this money yet? Like the universe answers you and shows you why you don't have all this money yet. Yet you keep asking the question in the same way, right? It's like, why does this keep happening to me? And the universe is like, here, I'll show you why it keeps happening to you. Here it is again and again and again. It's like, why does this keep happening? Well, why do you keep asking it in the same way? Let's change the way this question is asked. Right, let's look at how we phrase the question. Instead of saying, why does this keep happening to me? You say, well, what is it that keeps happening to you, first of all? And figure out how to rephrase your question. Where am I being shown that I'm beautiful? Where am I being shown that I'm special? Where am I being shown that I'm capable? Right? So changing the way we ask the question can very much change the answer. As we continue, to expect moral adherence is to flirt with tragedy. Moral adherence, people aligning to some moral good, some higher good. To expect moral adherence is to flirt with tragedy. Because the minute you expect someone to do something, oh, they're going to do this, it's kind of like, I know this is difficult. Like if your partner's cheating on you, right? To expect them to not cheat on you is to flirt with tragedy. I know, like in our society, the moral standard is that we won't, but it's becoming increasingly clear that people don't abide that. And that's a tough thing because, like, there are these expectations. Oh, I got married, or oh, I did this, or oh, I did that. And now that I've done that, I can rest easy knowing that everything's okay. Same thing with our jobs. It's funny, when I was a kid, the adults all had jobs for, decades and decades and decades. And now people change jobs quickly. It's a completely different way of living. Melissa's going to join me. Revisit 58 in a moment. Hey, Melissa, how are you today?
Hey, Martin, John, good to hear your voice. So, I've told you before, sometimes what you say confuses me. So I'm in one of those places right now. So
okay.
I just ask, and I don't know this, but I've struggled with this. Expectations are premeditated resentments. But in the classroom, it's hard And I think in life sometimes too, to not have expectations. I mean, we're told to, have expectations of our students and to hold them to a certain, level of accountability and expectations in life. So it's quite a conundrum for me to not have expectations. I know sometimes that's putting stress upon myself, because if it doesn't turn out the way that I expected, then there's, some disappointment sometimes. And so I don't know, I'm kind of struggling with this one. And
Okay. So we'll talk. We'll focus on expectations and the classroom, just so we can kind of focus on that. So, you love your children?
I do very much.
Yeah. So in that is where this idea of expectation has to be kind of positioned, right? So you want the best for these kids.
Absolutely.
Now, however, you are you're tied to the expectations of your principal.
Correct.
And the expectations of others. And so the whole system is very much dependent on expectation. Okay,
yes.
But that's something that works in a logical mind and what have you. Now, you will, as the teacher, right, as this entity, have to abide certain things. You need to get certain goals met. You need to do all of these certain things. But probably better than anybody that your kids aren't learning the same way. They don't all learn in the same way. They don't all learn in the same time frame.
Oh, no,
they all need
not.
different things. Now, when we talk about expectations, what we're doing is we're putting something on that kid that they might not care about. They might not care, really. What they care about is making you happy, making their parents happy, making other people happy. I don't know how old are the children that you work with?
Second, third, and fourth grade, so like 6, 7, 8, 9, in that age range.
Okay, my guess is there's not a whole lot of difference between 6 and 7 or 8 and 9, but between 6 and 9 and 7 and 9, like there's a huge difference in what's important to those kids.
Yeah.
And 6 and 7 is an interesting time because it's the end of a emotional and consciousness relationship that revolves around survival, really. Like they're interested in the hard facts of things and like space and their bodies and other things like that, while 8 and 9 are more interested in relationship. And so you probably start losing their attention quicker through the 8 and 9-year-olds.
Oh, absolutely.
So as you have expectations, one, you have to recognize that like these are two different animals. A 6 and 7-year-old is a completely different animal than an 8 or 9-year-old. So your expectations need to kind of, if you're going to have expectations, they need to be adjusted almost for every child.
Yeah.
And at that point, why use your energy and time to have an expectation? Like, they are who they are. Now, you're going to give yourself all of this understanding of who they are, and you're going to watch some of these kids grow from 6 to 9. And if you have an expectation of what you're going to see over the next 4 years, are you willing to be flexible with your expectations so as to not let them know that your expectation has to change as they do.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know? And it's fine to have an expectation because you work within a system. But if you can, in your heart, not have expectations for them, where it's like, let's see what... Because the thing is if given freedom, they'll surpass every expectation you set. And you've probably seen that in some students that that didn't need you so much.
I guess my struggle is kind of, like you said, because I am in an institution where I, am expected to, or I have certain expectations placed upon me, and there are expectations for the students. I think I'm going to run out of time. Oh, no, I still have time.
No, you got plenty of time.
The right number. I thought that was a 0 in the front, not an 8, sorry. Okay. But
I wear glasses too. It's all right.
Maybe I need to get mine on. But I'll give you an example. So I'm not a traditional teacher in the sense of I'm in a classroom with a certain group of students. So okay. I'm what's called an academic engagement teacher. So I take students that, let's say, are having struggles in certain areas, and I develop strategies and do different things to try to help them achieve these deficits and, work on strengthening these areas that they may need strengthening. So there's a lot of kind of expectation there. But what I've noticed, and, last year was actually my first year in this role, is it was really great because I did see that the kids did. A lot of them, the majority of them, in fact, met the expectations, and some of them even exceeded the expectations. So in that regard, I guess that's kind of where my conundrum is, because I was so excited when I was able to use this data and show this progress that these kids had made and how they had grown from, the beginning of the year, and how the things that I was doing with them really had yielded a result. So I guess maybe that's where I'm kind of
Let me ask
struggling. Go ahead.
Do you ask your children what they want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I a lot of times I do give them choices, and I think that makes it a lot easier for them to buy in. So let's say, for example, we're working on short vowel sounds. So I'll have a few different games that may address that, or different activities, let's say, and I'll present those to the kids, and I'll say, okay, we can do this, we can do this, or we can do this. And I let them, let's say I have a group of 6, and I'll let those kids kind of vote, and kind of majority rules kind of thing. But I have found that, they really enjoy giving a choice. And I think about it as myself. I like to be given a choice. So, as I've grown over the years and gained hopefully a little bit more wisdom, I've found certain things where I'm not, oh, this is what we're going to do. Because, sometimes, like you said, they don't care. So right. I like to give them a choice and kind of have them, because I feel that really ups the buy-in and makes them want to do better if it's something they want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's huge. So there's a number of things at play here. One, we all work in a system, and parents today have expectations of their children, and they get rewarded often when they meet that expectation. And there's all sorts of ways that you can, and you're getting results. And so congratulations on that, because that's huge. And we want children to learn certain things and stuff. Now Dow is coming at this from a very different perspective. If we take this all the way back, schools, teachers, the whole role of those things, expectation is what gets you paid. Expectation is what drives this forward. It's what gets funding in this country.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we all are living as part of this system, And these children are going to be raised in this system, and we have to train them, not unlike a dog, how to work, how to be, we're training children how to be housebroken, essentially, right? We're saying these are the things that you need to know. You need to know reading, writing, and arithmetic, and you need to know those to such a proficiency so that we can communicate with you how you're supposed to be in our society. So this is how broken everything really is. Like children don't get to live and explore themselves because the system is so rigged in the favor of certain things. And this isn't me being like mean to the system or you or anything like that. We are training children, and it's great when they're prepared for the system that we live in, because they're not going to be communicated. Like I am, like we don't want to get into personal things, but I'm not a fan of general literacy. I think that, we need to be able to communicate with people on multiple levels in multiple ways. But expectations when we're in a system like this work until they don't. You aren't going to reach everybody.
No.
And that sucks.
Yes, it does.
Because those kids that you can't reach cannot assimilate to the system. At least cannot yet assimilate to the system. And the system is not going to bend for them. And they will be seen as unteachable. They will be seen as, and this is what this verse means when it says you invite misery. When you have expectations. Because when those children don't meet those expectations, does that mean they're broken?
No, I think that just means, like we were saying before, that you have to find a different way to go about doing things, because it's like, trying to fit a square peg into a round. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it just doesn't work. And that's what, I've learned, like I was telling you before, over the years, just you have to be flexible. And I think you mentioned something about flexibility is that, it's every single child is different. And that's one of the wonderful things about what I do is I get to experience such different personalities and learn about these different children. And it's just amazing to see the way that they look at things sometimes.
That's right.
So different from the way that we look at things. And when you were talking about, the ones that don't reach those expectations, I was thinking of a child last year, and he really, really struggled, and I think it was because, like you were saying, there was a lot going on in his home life. And, I think that being a child of trauma, I could relate to a lot of what he was dealing with. It didn't make it okay, like when he mooned the people next door and, that kind of thing. But it did help me understand, and to love him, even though he wasn't necessarily succeeding academically. I still loved him, and I never gave up. And that's what I was saying. I still had an expectation that I wanted him to succeed. So I guess that's kind of where my conundrum is that, because I'm in this system, and I do, I think part of it is actually a desire from my heart, though, because I do think that some of these skills will benefit them in life, and especially understanding like the alphabetic principle, because it's going to be in your face your whole life. So the better you can understand it, the more beneficial it'll be, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. If you wanted to come back up, great. Otherwise, I can just go on and talk about it. Well, for me, when I look at that, because I was a poor student, and I don't, there are things that I don't like I don't like reading.
Hey, can I challenge you to reframe that and say that you weren't a poor student, just maybe some of it wasn't easy for you? Because I don't believe that. I think you were, and I think you still are, an amazing student of life. So I'll just throw that at you. Sorry.
I'm smarter than most people, I think. But as a student, I have no interest in being a student. You know, like I'm a diligent learner, you know, and I learn a lot. But school wasn't a place that I learned because I don't learn the way people teach. And so it's interesting to me because I love learning, and I wrote a translation of the Tao. So when I say I don't like reading, or I don't, you know, like, I mean, I work well with all these things, you know. But I've come to it. Like, I didn't start really loving learning until I was out of school. And for me, and that's why I think the Tao really kind of resonates with me, because it is so open. And yes, you know, when we talk about the system, and when we talk about school, and when we talk about the government, we talk about all of this stuff like reading, writing, and arithmetic, those are the things that you need, and all of this. Yes, it's true. Like, we have created a society in which that's true. You know, it wasn't, I mean, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, the literacy level was extremely different than it is today. And, you know, it's interesting because how many, like, do you run across 9-year-olds that are illiterate still?
I would say that there are some that are, yes, unfortunately.
Yeah. And they're not motivated to do it in their own heart. But that doesn't mean they can't communicate. And that doesn't mean that they will be left behind by our system. But that doesn't mean they don't have things to offer.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting you bring that up because our superintendent of the school system actually visited our school yesterday, and she was talking about a new initiative where they're trying to say that if a student has not reached a certain level of mastery with regard to reading by third grade, that they are now going to begin retaining children again. I don't know if you know that for a long time that's something that they've really been opposed to, is they thought, you know, that retaining a child had certain social ramifications, and not only social, but like esteem. It had effects on their self-esteem and that sort of thing. So, I just thought that was really interesting that you brought that up, and that the superintendent actually asked us yesterday our thoughts about it, and I didn't have a whole lot to say.
It's tough. So I used to do this podcast called Recover Yourself. And I interviewed the president of the Good Teachers Association here in the United States, and it was all about grading. And he talked to me, you know, grading is only about 200 years old, so it's really not that old. And failing is such a problem. And there is a style of grading in which we grade, you know, pass and not yet, rather than fail. The idea that you don't have it yet. You know, it's a completely different way of looking at things, you know, and that's where expectations can really be sort of managed. Because it's like, you know what? You're still working on the reading thing. And we all know that you're still working on the reading thing. And it's not a big deal. Rather than, you failed at reading, we're going to keep you back. It's like, no. In the reading category, you haven't gotten this yet. You know, and I know that this is probably a a higher education idea, because like you move forward with your community, right? You get first grade, second grade, third grade. Now you're moving forward with everybody. And there is, in our society, there is a scarlet letter sort of thing with terms of failing. You failed, and so now you've been held back. But what, and I get it, but that there's all sorts of things that happen, and your education is now connected to the education of others, and now there are expectations that others are holding for you. But if they're not, and that's why I ask, if you ask the children that you work with, what's important to them? Because it's like, well, what if reading isn't important to this person? Is holding them back doing anything at all, or is pushing them forward doing anything at all? Because they're just going to get further and further back. And if they didn't get it yet, how are we going to ask them to read, Lord of the Flies, right?
Yeah, we're definitely not doing that at my level, friend.
No,
I know what you're saying. No,
yeah.
And I think, and this is the last thing I'll say, because I know I've been talking a long time, but I can
First
do
off,
that.
I love these conversations I have with you. Your ability to grapple with some of these concepts is, really beautiful. And there are agreements that you have made in terms of being a teacher, that these concepts are going to butt right up against, and they're going to the entirety of your career and everything that you have built is at odds with some of these concepts. And the thing is like where you are within the system that we live in, like you're teaching children, like the system that we're living in, and you're teaching them to work within the system that we're living in. And the system that we're living in isn't necessarily aligned with Tao. So that it means that you're going to grapple with some of these things, and we're just going to have to throw our hands up and say, well, these things have been interfered with already, and we can't see beyond the veil of what we're living. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do get what you're saying. It is hard to see beyond, what you're day to day grappling with, so to speak. But like with regard to that, yesterday when we had that discussion, the superintendent brought up the whole idea. I don't know if you've ever heard of the idea of the pipeline to prison.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody brought that up, and I just that frustrates me so much. And I think that's part of where my passion with the expectations is I would love to do anything within my power to help somebody to not end up in prison. And when they say that if you haven't achieved blah, blah, X, Y, and Z by the third grade, you're going to, I just use that hypothetically. It might not be third grade, whatever, the ideal is that for me is very, very frustrating,
Absolutely.
Think that there's nothing that I can do to help this child and to think that their future. I mean, I look at these children, like you asked me, do I love my students? And I love them so thoroughly that to think of them living a life like that, it kind of breaks my heart.
No, I hear that. And the thing is that's not, there's a number of things that are not going to feel comforting. But one, it's like these children are up against it because they're not aligned with the system. And the only problem is that they, for whatever reason, can't work within the system that we made. And prison is made for that 12% of people, or whatever percent, 3% of people, 10% of people, whatever it is, that don't align with this traditional way that we've decided the world is supposed to run. They're not bad people. They're people that have been failed by a system that doesn't have enough room for that variety, for that style, for that. And I was a hair's breadth away from being in prison. I'm lucky that and grateful that I've never been. But as an addict, I started using at 13. So just a couple years after you're done with your kids.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, that's because my mind doesn't work in the way that an education system that we built wants it to work. It works differently. And I don't know what it is that makes it work differently. And I'm lucky that I came across the Tao in my 20s. And I came across sobriety in my 20s. And I came across, I left gangs in my teens. But, it's not. These children have lives that they're going to live, and some of them will end up in prison. And loving them is probably more than anybody else has ever done. Loving them for who they are, not for what they accomplish, not for what their expectations are, what your expectations of them are, just loving them openly.
And that's why I was placed on this earth, Martin.
Yes. And you just love them. And yes, you have a job and you have to uphold that job and you have to turn certain numbers and stuff. But is it going to be so bad if you love somebody and they find their specialness rather than finding that they don't fit? Or wouldn't you prefer them to find their specialness than you get a raise?
Yes, I would.
And that's why we don't have expectations. Now, that doesn't mean that these kids don't want you to have expectations. They may, because at least then they know what to do, and so you can have those. But some of these kids don't even think that they can meet any expectation, or they want to, but everything is working against them because they're dyslexic, or there's home life issues, or they don't get enough food.
Yeah.
You cannot have an expectation for someone to be able to answer a question right when they did not have breakfast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. If their basic needs haven't been met, they could give 2 flying fig leaves about anything that I'm doing. If there's craziness and drama going on in their family, that's where their mind is at. They don't care about what I'm saying in the classroom. I could go jump in a lake for all they flipping care. You know what I'm saying? And but that for me, and I guess sometimes like with that in mind, it doesn't mean that I'm going to give up though. No. I'm not going to give up, and I'm still going to have an expectation that I can help this child. And maybe like you said, though, the help isn't succeeding the way that the system wants them to succeed. Maybe the help is me just loving them the way that they are and letting them know, that I'm in their corner and that I'll be there and will help them any way I can.
Yeah. And that doesn't have to be tied to specific expectation. Like you have an expectation maybe of yourself to love them, but that doesn't even have to be an expectation. It's just something you do. And you don't even have to say, my love is going to get results that I understand. Your love is going to get results, but you might not ever be able to know what those results are. You might not be privy to the person that they will become because you loved them. That might not happen until they're 22.
Well, that's okay. Even if I don't see it, if there was a positive result because of something I did, it was worth it.
I love you. You know, Omar picked number 77 earlier, and I don't know if you were here for that, but it's the bending of a bow. And the one thing that I wanted to bring up about that verse for you is that the master knows that all things are being adjusted. Although she cannot always see it in action, she has faith it is working through her. That's the tidbit that we can add to this 58 that can help, I think, understand, right? It's the bending of a bow. Everything is getting adjusted. And so the master knows and has faith that it's working through her. Although she cannot always see it in action, she has faith it is working through her. All things are being adjusted. In this way, she allows her actions to unfold. So your actions are going to unfold, and they're going to happen, and you're going to touch these children in a way that no one else can. And that's because you love them. It also says neither dwelling on them nor taking credit. You just do what you do. The last line of that 77 is, aligned with Tao, they complement all things. They complement these children and what they need and what they require. And it moves them into a new space. And of course, expectation, when you start working with jobs and when you start working with the system and we start working with all those things like they require expectation, because if you didn't have expectation, how are we going to know that you did a good job at your job? You know, but in all of it, in your heart, there doesn't have to be expectation. Julie, how are you, dear?
All right. Yeah, I'm good. I had a lot of time yesterday where I did pretty much nothing. Mm-hmm. And I could mull around in my head for a little while. And I discovered I could suddenly see the ripples of the stone being dropped in the water. And I think that's pretty much what you're describing to Melissa as she's working and loving and being who she is with these children, is those ripples that will go from that. Could be in years to come, it'll make a difference. And this is a thing that I noticed yesterday. The things that I say, I do, and action and think and everything today, there will be ripples from that. And yesterday, I noticed those ripples.
I'm so glad.
It's interesting. I didn't feel great about it, actually. I really didn't feel really very good about it. I kind of give myself a little bit of a beating up and, it's just pretty awful. I had a rough time yesterday. And when I have a rough time like that and I'm trying to kind of look at things, and like I said, take off the old rose-tinted glasses at times is quite handy.
Yeah.
And I was looking at them, and then those moments for me are the learnings. They're the growth. And it's really uncomfortable to grow sometimes.
It is. And it's uncomfortable, it's hard to take a step back.
Yeah.
And look at the choices that we've made and realize that some of those choices have been made under the influence of something that we don't really believe in.
Yeah.
Like we were talking with Melissa, there's the system that we're all a part of and we contribute to. I mean, we're first world, white folks out here in the world and taking a lot for granted often, taking a lot, and continuing to contribute to the hierarchy.
To that whole, to contribute to it. We contribute to it all the time, don't we?
All the time. And when we do that, to do that with some awareness is great. And to recognize that, like, I don't ever want to tell somebody that what they're doing is quote unquote bad. You know, it's like, I don't, even if you're a bill collector, like, okay, that's fine. We are, you know, and if they're like, well, I have expectations that they're going to pay their bill, or I have you know, it's just like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But it's starting from we have to just be aware of the fact that that's starting from a poor preface. It's starting from a poor, we're starting from a poor place. We're starting from a place in which we are already under the influence of the institution, and the institution is not aligned. The institution is so far afield already that what we're trying to do, and, you know, what I want to encourage, you know, from Melissa and everybody, is just love them. Love these people. Because if we have an expectation for them, then we are going to, I remember when I was teaching for the Chicago Housing Authority, these are children who live in families that are housed by the city.
Yeah.
So they're poor, and they get fed 2 meals a day from the city.
Yeah.
And they are the ones that are having difficulties in schools because their home life is so tumultuous, but they're being held, you know, in certain ways. And then, you know, they start to have expectations because the housing authority wants them to have expectations of them because they want to do a good job, and all of this, you know, now you have, you're the bottom, you're at the bottom of a hill of people trying to get raises and promotions and all of this stuff. And love is really something that is, that although many people would like to believe that they're doing these things because of love, a lot of people do it because they want a raise, because they got a degree, because they did a thing, you know, and they're in debt.
They want to achieve personal
achievement. They want to achieve, right?
Yeah,
they want a pat on the back, just like anybody else.
Yeah.
And the thing is some children don't care about the pat on the back because they don't believe it.
Or maybe it's never existed. Maybe they don't even know what that is. Yeah.
And when it comes, it's like, well, why are you doing that? Now I'm suspicious of you. Now I'm, you know, like, I know that was what it was for me. And so it's like, and when we talk about expectation, when we talk about those things, it's like, really, it's the flexibility. It's like, maybe I can remove a single expectation rather than the whole of expectation, because it's all about what I can do now. Where am I now? What can I do now? And I can hear and I can feel Melissa's pain in, like, I would hate to call it failing a child or having a child not meet those expectations. And that's what this is talking about. It's like having expectations. You're flirting with this thing. Does that mean that that's the way you should do it every time? Well, if you could, but can you? No. Like, because you're under the influence of expectation. Your boss is under the influence of expectation. The state is under the influence of expectation. And that's all keeping this dying show on the road.
Yeah.
You know? And it's... And the choices that we make from moment to moment are really, sometimes they're about survival, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's where we're at right now. And if they're not the best choices, that's okay. We don't like that we did that. That's all. We're going to do it until we don't. These are like, we can apply that to such a broad range of incidents.
Yeah. I kind of think the same as you. I was thinking, though, you even within those expectations that we have or we kind of try to live up to, we can still be ourselves in that. So if we're teaching someone a particular thing and the expectation is for them to be able to recite it to you, which, again, like you, school wasn't the place for me really to do any learning, all of my learning came much later, later, and in a different form of learning. And even now, like I'm talking to you, and you know that I'm a student, I'm still a student, and I find it so difficult to fit into that little square hole, and produce the square stuff. When I feel inside that I'm like a star shape, or even a circle, or a triangle even. But I just can't fit through that square hole and produce that square shape,
Right.
And I struggle with it. I struggle with it a lot. So maybe when I think about that, I think, what is it about me that I can offer to this?
Right.
What can I offer to this that comes from my soul? What comes from my essence? What is that I'm offering? And what I'm saying to Melissa is even the expectations that, you have for these children and you want them to succeed, of course you do. But it's years down the line, it'll be somebody like me, Martin John, that can look back and point out to a teacher who, even though I didn't really learn what she was teaching me, I remember how she made me feel. And from that, I felt valued. And from feeling that value, I then started to create for myself. And it's that she's giving. It's not always the square shape. It's sometimes the star shape that comes out from that at the other end. And all because she's added that extra bit just by being who she is.
Right.
Yeah.
And and that's that brought something to mind. It's your expectation. When you have an expectation of someone and they don't meet it, they don't think they're good enough. They're not mad at you for having the expectation. They get down on themselves because they're not what you want them to be. And then when they're not what you want them to be, they start to do that apathetic adherence, right? They start to resist. And then this is interfering. You get met with resistance, or worse, apathetic adherence.
Yeah.
As it says in this 58.
I did enjoy that when you explained what that was.
Yeah.
That was such a beautiful explanation of it, because now you're in the unknown.
Right. You don't know what's wrong with this child, and they're giving you what you want. Maybe they're even cheating to get it to you, and they're not learning at all, or they're not engaging anymore, and they're just giving you what you want, and you don't know who they are.
Yeah,
that's the saddest thing ever.
Yeah, that apathetic adherence is basically a door. Yeah, it's a door. They've just shut the door on your connection.
That's right.
Really.
And now you don't know. It's like it's great when they resist, because at least then you know what you're fighting. Yeah. But when they adhere, when they agree with you, but they don't care about agreeing with you, they don't agree, they don't truly agree with you. They're just doing it to get you off their back.
Yeah.
And then in the end, they're just getting shoved through as if they're unimportant, and you don't know. And they see that you're not asking them anything further. And they're like, well, I made them happy. That's what's important. And then they just disappear. And that's so painful for the child and for society.
Yeah, they and in the end, through that, no more interest. They hold no value for themselves, because they're learning that they have no value.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's a complete kind of circle, really, and it is, like you said, it is very sad. I think the one thing we can all do as people is example value, example it within ourselves, like Melissa does, you do. I do that as much as I can. Sometimes I'm down on myself.
That's
I really
me
do
too.
Drop right down, and I have to sit there and sit that with that for a minute, and then show kindness and a bit of compassion to myself and say, look, it's okay. All right. Just by being alive is good. And by coming on and chatting or listening to Melissa, listening to you, listening to a lot of people, just taking in little bits of information and sitting with that information for a little while and letting it soak its way in. I can then find value in myself again.
Right.
And these people will find value in themselves, whether Melissa gets to teach them exactly what's on the itinerary or not. But because of the person that she is, they will remember her.
Yeah.
And that
and they're gonna,
yeah.
And I always like, because of her, they will remember themselves.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's the thing that's more important than, like, because again, she's not doing this to take credit. She's doing this to get those kids to love themselves.
Correct.
Like, I think that's what she's doing. I think that's what she wants, is she wants those children to love themselves so that she doesn't have to hold their hand for their entire lives.
Yeah.
She wants to be able to watch those children walk away a little bit more confident and a little bit more understanding of what the world is here, what they can receive from the world.
Yeah.
Oh.
And she sampled love. She sampled love to them. There we go.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing to do. Thank you so much, Martin John. I feel a lot better already.
Oh, I love you, dear. You have a wonderful day.
And you. Take care, love. Bye.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining me. We went over 58 and 77 today. Melissa, I can't express enough how much I admire all that you do and what you're doing. And I don't ever want to confuse you. It's just going to happen sometime. And I really appreciate you coming up and being vulnerable and chatting with me about all of this. It's wonderful. Kathy Marshall, how are you, dear?
I'm good.
Good.
I won't keep you. I know you're getting ready to get off.
No, I'm here now. Come on. We're in it together. Like, I wouldn't have brought you up if I didn't have the time to chat.
I just wanted to pop in and say thanks for the other day when I was on here, and it helped out a lot.
Yeah?
It did.
I'm glad.
And the talk you did today was really good, and it hit some points too, which I didn't think about. It's definitely different.
You didn't think? Oh, yeah. It's
all that, and it's like, there is something that you have to do in separating and stuff, and it's like, it's true. I just don't know how to do that.
No, and that's and the thing is like Tao isn't something that you know. It's something that you just you allow yourself to think about, because we have moved very far from the nature of things. We are separate, right? And in our world, we feel very separate. We don't feel like, when we see squirrels and stuff outside, it's like we want to keep them away. And, we don't want those things, coming in our house. We don't want those things around, or we don't want, like bees and bugs and all of these things. It's like there's a time when we lived all together. We were all one, and now it's like, we're all... It's so important to understand that we're part of it.
Yep, we just have a bigger square box around us.
Yeah, and that's good. It's good. Like, shelter is so important, and food and water and all of that,
Yep.
But community is too. And that's one of the things that Noom Vibe really brings to each of us that share, is like we get to communicate in different ways, and we get to hear new things. And really, like, for me, it's like it's just a way for me to share love more, and a way to share different ideas of being more loving and living our lives without all the weight that we're given everywhere else.
All the expectations that everybody's putting on it.
It comes so quick. As soon as we meet somebody, sometimes it's like, oh, well, I expected you to do this. It's just like, well, that's not what I do.
Yeah, I just said hello.
Yeah, I just said hello. It's funny, being a man. It's so awful. I've talked to women before. It's just like, if you're nice to men, they think that you want to, get with. And I'm just like, oh my God, like. No one can be nice to people. No one can just, everything, there's expectations that come to people's minds without any provocation.
Yes, and they keep telling you they love you and they can't live without you, and it's like, dude, I don't want all that. I just want somebody to talk to.
Right.
Just somebody to say hi. Just,
just be
normal
like,
thing.
why? Yeah. And
I don't need all that.
right. And it's like, and so much of the Tao is like, look, take things as they are. Allow this person to be who they are. Don't try and convince them with all your words and your actions or your duties or your don't. If you have an expectation, and that's what happens, people have an expectation that, oh, you're going to like me if I do this. You're going to eventually concede if I do that. And it's like, no, stop trying to tell me who to be.
You gotta let it go, man.
That's right. So do you have a number today?
I was thinking about 75.
There needs to be a purpose, is the title of this. That's there's something nice about that title I like quite a bit. Like, there needs to be a purpose. There needs to be a reason, and the reason as it relates to Tao is life. Life is the reason, just to live and to experience this life. We've seen that a lot, and we're going to read this verse. People are starved for purpose because everything they do is taxed. That being so, why would they venture to do anything? By being intrusive, governments corral their people, forcing them to make a living instead of simply living. People have no purpose when their purpose is appointed. Without purpose, why would they want to live? All of this is intrusive meddling. It robs people of their lives and lines the pockets of those in authority. Does anything stand out to you?
I got a question.
Yeah.
With the purpose, what you just read, isn't that why some people kind of go out of their way to do stuff that they forgot about when they were younger? Is that what that means?
Well,
get to do this.
Purpose in this verse is life, as it relates. You just live your life. And that's expressed here, like, by being intrusive, governments corral their people, forcing them to make a living instead of simply living. The reason people do things that they used to do when they were children is because they lost sight of living, and they spent way too much of their life living for other people. Living because expectations were placed on them. Living because they had fallen victim to reward and punishment. They did something, and they were told not to waste their time with that thing in one way or another, maybe not directly. And when those people stepped away from the things that they loved to do when they were 4, they realized that that's when they lost themselves. That's when they lost the importance of who they were. That's when they lost their purpose. That's when they lost the life that they were going to lead. And so they go back to that. Not because that's what they need, that thing. They didn't need to, color. But they needed to find something. They needed to attach to something. They needed to do something that would ultimately they enjoyed. And maybe they don't enjoy it anymore as an adult, but at least it sparks something in them to try and remind them of who they were before they lost their purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That kind of does make sense.
Yeah. Because, I always talk about the idea of, you're born and you live under the influence of your parents. And so if your parents think watching TV is, the activity of lazy people, well, you're going to carry that. And so now as when you sit down to watch TV, it better be productive. You better watch documentaries in the news so that you're not lazy, and you're going to hold on to these ideas that you get. And that's when the Tao talks about governments, what else would we describe a family, right? The family could be considered a government, like the child is the, the citizen and the parents are the, ruling bodies, right? And so by being intrusive, governments corral their people. I want you to be a good student. I want you to eat this food. I want you to do these things. And now giving child full reign to decide their lives, that's not healthy either. But, putting them under your influence is doing the same thing, forcing them to make a living, where it's like and this isn't something that parents try to say, but sometimes it's like, in order to stay here, you have to be what we want you to be. You have to do good in school, or you're going to get spanked, or you're going to get in trouble, or you have to be nice to the neighbors, or you're going to get a tongue lashing when we get home, those sorts of things. That's the reward punishment system that, we raise children in. And the purpose is really just living your life and being yourself. And when you do that, you find yourself doing fun stuff. You start making things, and you start fixing things, and you start, caring for things, and you start gardening, and you start engaging, and you start observing. Because your heart is full. But it says here, people have no purpose when their purpose is appointed. Without purpose, why would they want to live? And that doesn't mean they want to die. It just means, why do they want to get up in the morning if they have to go to a job that they don't like, because they have to make a certain amount of money that they don't care about, to buy things they don't care about? To pretend to enjoy the food at a restaurant that they don't care about? Why would they want to do that?
They wouldn't.
Right. All they want to do is color, and they can't do that. Because when they were 4, they were told it wasn't important or whatever.
How do they understand it if they found it or not?
Right. They don't, even if it's in front of them, their life is so devoid of purpose that they don't know what they love. They don't know what they want to do, and they try and and this is why addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or social media, or sex, or whatever, that's why addiction is so popular today. Because there's so many people that are devoid of purpose, devoid of simply living. Everybody's interested in being an influencer and making money and doing all of the things that we do, while leaving themselves on the back burner. Because they don't know what to do. All they know is they've been told life is easy with money. So go make that however you can. It's like, you know what? Money is nice. I mean, you got to have a certain amount, but beyond that, it's not the answer to happiness.
No.
And the last line here, it says, all of this is intrusive meddling, and it robs people of their lives and lines the pockets of those in authority. And when your child is living so that they could be easy for you to raise, that's good for you. You know what I mean? That's good. That's good for the parent. But is it the path of the child? I mean, it is now. But that's where it's like, all this is in truth many. And when it says lines the pockets of those in authority, that doesn't necessarily mean financially. It just means, it's made your life easier in one way or another.
Does that come with all friends in it too?
Friends?
Yeah, like your friends in it, like if you're going back to your childhood of missing something, could that be because you have grown so far into your job or into your world that your friends and family and that cannot get in there to support you as far as help guide you or, help you enjoy life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we are all experiencing things differently. And so, friends are so important in life and in being able to experience things. But you may have had friends that compete with you. You may have had friends that want you to be a certain way. So friends are great, but friends can be part of that government as well, because they have, like, if you want to be part of our yoga group, you have to, get Lululemon pants, and you have to get, you have to abide certain things. Now, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, sometimes people just want to love you. And if they do, they love you regardless of you turning your back on them so that you can do your job or not. And they're supporting you, and they're sending you the energy that you need to continue doing what you need to do until you find your own purpose, until you find your purpose. Going back to friends is wonderful, like especially if you turned your back on them for your job. It's like, calling up people that care about you, calling people that love you. Like that's a beautiful path. But we don't do that often because we often feel a little bit of shame around that. We feel a little bit of like, I'm lonely, and I'm not supposed to be lonely because, that's not something people love in other people. And this is part of that purpose. This is part of that. That's like, we've been stripped of that because we have to be productive, and we have to, our job is so important, and our relationship is this way, and we have all of these rules as to how we're supposed to be. And yet they don't always come out that way. It doesn't always turn out right. That's why it says there needs to be a purpose, and that purpose is life. There needs to be a life here. And it's great to have friends. Can we be honest with them, and do we love them, and do we want to hang out with them? Or are we turning our back on them too? Or are they turning our back on us? And are we growing? Are we loving ourselves? Are we a friend to ourselves? And these are all just sort of questions. I don't want to make it all heavy and crazy, but I don't know. I'm wondering, is this resonating with stuff that you're going through right now?
Yeah. It's hard to put it all in a sense of understanding. So it's kind of bits and pieces of, okay, I got this and I'm focusing on this piece. And
right.
Then I have this piece that goes with that piece, but I don't know how it goes with that piece.
And sitting with it, in Tao, it talks about action and integration, right? So right now there is action. You're taking in information. I'm going to go ahead and send this text to you so you can kind of mull over it on your own time. But also, like, there needs to be integration. So, and integration isn't you thinking about it. You're going, the words say make a living, like the words, but it is more like, let's sit with this sort of confusion. Let's sit with this sort of muck of all of the stuff that got stirred up and let it settle. Just sort of like, maybe 15, 20 minutes, kind of sit. And if you would sit with me even right now and just kind of close your eyes and just kind of, like I'm feeling a little bit of like tension, but openness. So there's like in your stomach, like right over your belly button, just above there. And seems like it's kind of tending to the left side. So I'm going to put my hand on my belly, just to the left side. I'm just going to breathe into that. And you can join me if you'd like. It just sort of moved down into like the lower back. We're going to breathe back into that. The body really has a lot to offer in terms of information about what we're going through and how we're experiencing something. And that left side is a yielding side, right? That left side is a side of just allowance. And I don't know if the left side is like affecting you. I'm just sort of connected and trying to kind of just tilt my hips back and forth, left and right, and just sort of like move that energy around a little bit. And then you just kind of settle into the body. Because the body has the answer, right? Like you may have heard like the body keeps the score. Like your body knows where you've felt pain and it holds on to it because, we're afraid sometimes of feeling pain and sometimes we're afraid of dealing with pain. But when we can kind of just sit in just not sit in the pain, but sit in our body and just sort of be still. There's so many things going on all the time. And I don't know where all of this kind of fits into your life right now. But one, we don't want to get into a position where we're intrusively meddling, but we have lived lives in which we've been meddled with. Our entire childhood was living under the influence of our parents and then our teachers. And like each one of those is teaching us through probably punishment and reward. And punishment isn't a way to be taught something. We just are taught that we're not good enough. We're not mad at our parents. We get mad at ourselves. We get down on ourselves. And then when it's our turn to be able to be the meddlers, we think we're doing it the right way. And then we say, I turned out okay, when in fact we didn't. Because if we did, we wouldn't be doing this. I did that. I used to say, like, I was beat as a kid. Like, I turned out okay. And someone looked at me and said, no, you actually didn't. And I broke down. I was like, oh, I think you're right. Which, put my health and my healing squarely into my hands. And it was my healing that allowed me to love others deeper. Not punish them, to love them. Not take my love away or pretend to take my love away because they didn't do something. This is taxing. This is why that first line says people are starved for purpose because everything they do is taxed. You're coloring and you're taxed because you're told you're wasting your time. You got homework to do. That's more important. And nobody likes to be taxed.
Coloring is much better.
Yeah, it is. It's much more productive, I'll tell you. I'm working on a mosaic right now with a friend of mine. He designed a mosaic, and it's going to take months for us to do, but every day I spend 6 hours just putting colored tiles down. It is an amazing meditation. I'm using tweezers, and I'm putting them in place, and it's just one after the next. And there's going to be, I'm going to be doing this for 2.5 months.
How long it takes me almost to do a puzzle. It's an easy one. I have one puzzle that I have not done yet, and I got to get my table cleared off before I can start it again. But my daughter got me a puzzle of my puppy.
Aww.
And her coloring is all tan, and it's very hard to distinguish which is which.
Well, that'll be fun.
3 months that we still couldn't get the outer rim together, and it's like, all right, we got to get this up. It's like, we'll come back.
You come back to it. Well, That might be a nice winter challenge.
Yes. I'm going to do that once I get back from my beach trip, when we go on the beach trip.
Oh, where are you going?
We're going up to North Carolina, to Outer Banks.
Oh, beautiful. And are you leaving soon?
Friday.
Nice. That's tomorrow. I mean, just so you know. Like,
I know. And I'm still not ready.
Okay. Well, you got plenty of time. You got 24 hours, maybe.
I do. I got plenty of time because my husband has to work in the morning, so it's going to be a little bit later before we leave. So, all right, I got a few extra hours.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad. Well, that's 75. I'll send that text to you, and you can spend your beach trip just being quiet.
That's what I plan on doing. It's like this has been a much needed help understanding and figuring out how to do it, because normally I sit in the field and I just sit there, and that's how I cope and get through things and just let it like lay over me. And
yeah, that's right.
Inspiration and ideas, and it's like, oh, I could do that. Yeah. And it's like with this, it's like this is helping to understand, because I can put a little input in and say, hey, what about this? What does this exactly mean? Because sometimes I don't understand what he's trying to tell me.
It's true. Like not everything comes direct.
It doesn't just come out and say, hey, you're doing this stupid wrong. Come on, try this way.
Right.
That's sometimes what I need.
Yeah, well, you won't get it that way. Like, sometimes you do. Sometimes you're like, no, you need to rest. Here, I'm going to break your foot for you. Right?
It's like, no, I'd rather not do that, but hey.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what it took.
Yeah. And ever since I joined this thing of Loom and learning on this thing and listening, just being on the background, not really interacting or anything, it's like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I've actually learned a little bit about myself, of how to actually cope with things and go through things if I had to on my own, where I can, take a step back, look at it, let it seep in, then try and go forward and do a different path.
Yeah. So, take your time. Patience.
Yes.
It's a big deal.
I have a lot of them. Sometimes it comes in tears. Sometimes it's just, okay, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, I wasn't trying to make it a long time after your show's usually over. But
no. I'm so glad that we got to connect again, because I do. I love connecting, and taking that little breathing break was really nice. And you're. It's always nice to connect with you. I'm so glad we did.
I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. You enjoy your vacation.
I will. I'll probably be talking to you. Probably.
No, I'll be looking forward to it. All right, sweetheart. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Okay, I'm going to end it there. Thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate your time and your attention. This is Martin John. This is Tao of the Day. If you are interested in the text that I read, you can always join me to get your own Tao of the Day. Or you can pick up a copy of my book, The Tao Te Ching, a New English version that you can find on my website. You can find all of those links in my profile. Thank you once again for joining me, and until next time, keep recovering yourself.